on, golf fans? It's your boy GS Luke here with our DFS core picks for this week's John Deere Classic. And while it's not a flashy event, I mean, boys, we're dealing with a dogshit field if I've ever seen one. You still have some large contests here on Draftkings to take down, so still plenty of profit to be made. And I'd argue with such little attention or such maybe effort being put into people's analysis this week, perhaps it's the week where we can go ahead and take something big down. So I'm looking forward to it. Going to be covering my top 6 GPP plays of the week, and I'm going to be building a majority of my lineups for. These are going to be plays $8,000 and above that I have a lot of confidence getting into contention, and for these large field type of contests that are going to have the type of upside you're looking for. They're not going to be safe plays. Some of them will be, but 2 or 3 of them going to be a little bit more risky, but are going to have that top 5 or of course winning upside that you're looking for in these large field GPPs. So that'll be the goal of this video. First, a review of last week where we did have Rory McIlroy up top, but our pivot off of him on Wednesday to Xander Schauffele certainly paid off. Patrick Cantlay looked like he could play for the first 3 days, but on Sunday reverted back to the can't play of old, so not really a surprise there. Outside of that, just a bunch of guys that made the cut for us, and while we didn't take home the big bucks last week, it was another just solid about 5% ROI kind of week. So just kind of building onto that bankroll. We did have quite a few of the top finishers, just wasn't able to get the perfect combination. Only had 7 6 of 6s last week. There was quite a bit of carnage with guys like a Jordan Spieth that missed the cut. A few other popular picks in the 7K range too that I wasn't personally on that missed the cut, like a Brendan Todd. But yeah, low 6 of 6 percentages last week. So if you didn't have many, don't beat yourself up too much about it. I mean, I only had 7, and I don't think I've had less than 20 for at least the last 2-3 months on tour. So not my best week, but hey, we got by, nothing to really complain about. But this week, like I said, with the lack of attention with the rest of the industry, I really think it's one of the weeks where, people like myself, a golf enthusiast, could really take advantage. So let's go ahead and hop right on in with the picks here for this week. Alrighty, on the screen we've got my projections for this week, and as per usual, you can get access to these directly on my Patreon page. The one thing about this week that makes it especially a great deal is that it is the last week before I end up raising the price. So it was $1 for the month for the last 4 to 5 months. More of a trial basis there, obviously wasn't the goal price. Going to go up to $10 a month starting here in July. So if you want to get in early, see what it's all about, go ahead and check it down below. It will be $1 for the rest of the week here. So on Thursday, when we get to July, it will start the next billing cycle there. But again, if you want to see what we've got here for the John Deere Classic, I would definitely recommend you guys go and check that out. But without further ado, let's hop into the preview for this week, where we'll go ahead and start with the key stats, where at the top of the board, this is definitely a putting first type of course. It's a birdie fest. You've heard people like John Rahm refer to these as putting fests. Even past champions here, like a Lucas Glover, has alluded to that. So in general, we know we have to worry about putting, but it's not the end-all be-all. So while 30% of my weighting is up there with shots gained putting, shots gained approach is there at number 2, which shouldn't be a surprise at all. A lot of emphasis on the shorter ranges from that 50 to 125, also that 125 to 150, which are going to be utilized a lot more this week than what we're used to seeing. Still some emphasis on the longer ranges as well. Off the tee, it's an accuracy over a distance course. It is rated about almost 6,300 yards, but despite that, a lot of that length is on the par 5s and the par 3s. Plenty of holes that are in that 350 to 400 yard range, which is why we're focusing on those wedge ranges as much as we are. A few other key stats I'm including, we're looking at birdie or better percentage, shots gained at quote-unquote birdie fests, or just when you're playing in easy conditions, more than a stroke and a half under par is what I'm using for that. Par 5 scoring, because of the short par 5s, something I'm looking at, fairways gained. Another emphasis on the precision aspect of this course rather than the power aspect. And also taking a look at DK scoring average. Just another way to encapsulate birdie or better percentage, because we are expecting a winning score of 20 under plus. Last year, 19 under par was the highest winning score we've seen for quite some time. I am expecting this to get super low, maybe even 22 to 25 under par. I'm going to try and take the guys that go out there and put up a lot of fantasy point and, of course, birdie production. So with all that in mind, let's take a look at the board, where you can see maybe for the first time ever, we do not have somebody in the 10K range as a core pick. And frankly, by the end of the week, I might be fading the entire 10K range. It's all going to come down to ownership to me. If any of them even sniff 20%, they're going to be an automatic fade. I'm not even sold on them, right? Number 23 in total mono ranking for Webb Simpson. I mean, I'm okay with his wedge play. I'm okay with the fact that his recent form has been a lot better than what we saw in the fall, but I'm not sure I can pay $10,600 and have him be 20% owned, right? So we'll have to see on Webb Simpson. Adam Hadwin, right? He's number 11 in the modeling, which isn't horrible, right? But he's $10,400. And I think Adam Hadwin might be really chalky, right? Like 25% owned. So I hope they're coming in the 12 to maybe 15% range. I would definitely be a buyer on those players there, but as is, without knowing pretty much any idea where they're going to come in, just not anyone I can make a decision on. So I'm going to wait and see on those two players up top. Sahith Theegala, probably a wait and see approach for me. I'm not sure if I'm going to get there. Jason Day, pretty much for certain not going to be in my player pool. So that's why I don't have anybody in that 10K range here. Denny McCarthy, I also expect to be extremely popular. So not sure if I'm going to be running to window to play like a 25% owned Denny McCarthy, which leaves me with the rest of these plays here. So let's go ahead and talk about the 6 core picks I'm getting to, which first off, Maverick McNeely at $9,500 is what I think is going to be the pivot of the slate. I expect him to be one of the lower owned players above $9,000. I expect Bazane Hoot to also be extremely low owned, probably Jason Day as well. Might even be single digit owned. And then Maverick McNeely, who might be right around like 10 to 15%. And in terms of recent form, right, he has a ton of red flags. And frankly, that's why I think he should be low owned. 2 missed cuts in a row. That was at the Travelers and, of course, the Charles Schwab. Hardly made the cut at the PGA. Byron Nelson, a top 35 finish. Just hasn't really looked like the McNeely that was flashing top 10, top 5 finishes from time to time during the fall swing. So if we take a look at the last 24 measured rounds, you'd probably expect to see very hairy stats, and that hasn't been the case. He's still gaining off the tee. Approach a little bit better than neutral, so not the worst for him, but still gaining significantly with the flat stick. If we take a look at the last 50 measured rounds, it pretty much holds up, right? Similar numbers with the putter, still gaining on approach and off the tee, just has been putting up the same type of stats, just not getting anything out of it. It's strange, right? And actually, I'd even argue that his last 24 measured rounds are better, right? He's gaining a little bit more off the tee. He's gaining a little bit more significantly with the putter. I don't understand how it's not translating to results. So I understand that scoreboard watchers, people that are just looking at his finishes, might expect him to be, in an extremely rough stretch of golf, but that really hasn't been the case per the metrics. So obviously, that's kind of an advertisement against shots gained, right? Obviously, they could be deceiving from time to time, but I also think perhaps it can, show us examples of players that aren't playing nearly as bad as we expect them to be. An example of this would be somebody like Seamus Power, who, despite not putting up great performances about a month and a half ago, his shots gained metrics looked pretty solid across the board. In fact, was gaining across all 4 categories. I mentioned it was just a matter of time before he went out there and would actually realize the success that those shots gained would actually indicate. And obviously, pretty solid performance at the PGA, has made a few cuts of late, and is starting to bear that out. So I'm going to be buying in on Maverick McNeely. If he was coming in with any semblance of form, even remotely close to what we saw towards the beginning part of the season, you'd be looking at a 20 to 25% McNeely, and he would be certainly in that 10K range. So the form gives us a pivot spot, obviously a little bit lower ownership on McNeely because of the red flags coming in. But if anybody's going to turn it around and just absolutely break the slate at low ownership, I think he could be your guy this week. So I like him at that price tag and will be featured in plenty of my lineups. Next up, we've got 2 guys in a row. So let's go ahead and start with Scott Stallings, who I'd argue has the best upside, or I should say the highest upside of anybody above $9,000, or maybe even above $8,000, to be quite frank with you. Somebody who has posted plenty of top 10 finishes, and even if we just look at his last 10 starts, you'll see that's apparent, right? Top 10 finished last week at the Travelers. A lot of that due to a Sunday charge where he absolutely went off there. Top 5 at the Charles Schwab Challenge. But if you take a look at his 2021-2022 season, he has another 3 top 10 finishes. This guy, when he gets into contention, typically makes it count, and he makes a ton of birdies regardless of his position on the leaderboard. So if you take a look at birdie or better percentage, those DraftKings average point stats that I was talking about a little bit before, he's going to pop in all of those categories. And last week, it was a similar golf course at TPC River Highlands where it was much more about precision off the tee than it is power. That's Scott Stallings' game two in a nutshell, right? Somebody who's not going to overpower golf courses at this point of his career. And the shots gained metrics aren't elite for Scott Stallings, right? I think that's why he's going to be low owned. People don't really equate his name with upside, but when you take a look at his finishes this year, he has more ceiling performances than anybody else in this field, period. The end. The only other player that comes close is Adam Hadwin, and he's mostly just posting top 15s, top 20 finishes. If you just, bring it down to actual top 10 finishes, he's the class of this field here, and there's really something to actually having that upside inside of you. There's guys, for example, like Denny McCarthy, that are extremely consistent, particularly at difficult golf courses where he's going to make a bunch of cuts for you, right? A lot more than pretty much anybody in this field. Scott Stallings has a ton of missed cut equity, but at the same time, he brings a lot more upside than, at least in my opinion, anybody else in this field, regardless of price. So $8,900, especially in a GPP type of format, I absolutely love him, particularly with that form on Sunday. He went off in the last round of that golf tournament. If he found a feel that he can continue into this week, watch out, could be your first round leader. That was a hell of a round on Sunday, that's for sure. Next up, we've got Patrick Rogers. So the next man in there, back-to-back picks on the core picks, going to be at $8,800. And in terms of modeling, you can see he's a top 5 pick, number 3 in the modeling. Great putter on bent grass, and also has pretty solid course history. So something to mention here, of course, if we take a look at our core picks, McNeely has played here twice, 2 made cuts, a top 20 finish the last time out. Scott Stallings, a little bit more volatile, did have a top 5 finish in 2017, so shows you what you're looking for, right? Missed cut like you'd expect for somebody with his volatility, but another top 20. Patrick Rogers, a second place finish in 2017, so pretty solid course history for all of these players, and has made the cut in all 3 starts. So in general, with the recent form that we've seen of Will, he just checks every box you're looking at, gaining off the tee, gaining close to 3/4 of a stroke per round with the putting, and even the finishes of late have been there, right? He's seen just a bunch of made cuts, top 20 at the RBC Canadian. While he can be volatile, like pretty much every player in this field, right? Everyone's mispriced. You're not going to expect to see all made cuts for these guys in the 8K range. Top 10 finish at the Mexico Open, he flashes that upside, kind of similar to a Scott Stallings, right? He had the 2 top 10 finishes, 1 top 5 finish over those last few starts. McNeely, we haven't really seen that from, right? But just look at the beginning of his season. That's where you really started to see that high-end volatility. So that's what I'm looking at this week. I think there's plays that might be safer on the board, like a Denny McCarthy, maybe even like a Adam Hadwin or Webb Simpson up top. I'm not trying to get a top 10 finish, or I'm not trying to get a top 15 finish. I want somebody who's going to finish in that top 3 and be relevant in these large field GPPs from an optimal lineup perspective. And I know you're probably going to want to leave salary on the table this week. We'll talk about that a lot more extensively on the live stream version on Wednesday night at 7 p.m. But as per right now, I love the guys here in this 9 and 8K range, and particularly from an upside perspective with guys like a Scott Stallings and a Patrick Rogers. Moving on to the bottom of the 8K range, let's talk about Brendan Todd to start. Kind of similar to a Webb Simpson. They have a similar skill set. Accurate off the tee, great with the wedges, which is really what I'm trying to hone in on this week. That 50 to 125 range. We talked about that before, but also that 125 to 150 range. Brendan Todd is top 5 in both categories. In fact, with the 50 to 125 range, averages a proximity of just over 15 feet. And for somebody of his prowess with the putter, that's going to pay huge dividends. And he loves bent grass too. You can see gains close to 2/3 of a stroke per round on bent grass. And you'd figure, he's got to be coming in with bad form. Why is he only $8,500? That's not the case. The putter's been electric, gaining around the green and with the approach like you'd expect, and off the tee, a loser. And all of that is due to distance. And this is a golf course where we are prioritizing that accuracy over the distance. There's at least 9 holes where players will be hitting to the same spot off the tee. A lot of that is just due to construction, layup areas that are designed by the golf course. That plays directly into Brendan Todd's skill set. So love him this week. He's the number 2 model pick. Loves bent grass. The course history, I don't believe it's that extensive. Let's see. Yeah, he had 1 made cut, 2 missed cuts. So that's maybe the one red flag that we have for Brendan Todd of late. Also, the missed cut last week as chalk. little bit of a red flag there. So he's not without flaws here, but the upside, especially from the modeling perspective, is readily apparent. So, last week he was a fade for us, ended up missing the cut. Hopefully that keeps his ownership lower, as people might feel a little bit burned about it, but definitely a bounce back candidate that I'll be counting on. Speaking of a bounce back, we need one from Cameron Davis. We played him last week. He was in contention after the first 2 rounds, but completely fell off a cliff over the weekend, particularly with his short game, where he lost over 6 strokes on Saturday and Sunday to the field. In terms of the modeling, it still loves him. You can see he's a top 5 model ranking. Another player that tends to gain a lot of strokes on these bent grass greens. The course history for Cam Davis, not extensive. 2 made cuts here, both in the 50s, so hasn't flashed that upside. But if you look at the recent form, you'll see the kind of upside I'm looking at. Right, top 10 finish at the Charles Schwab, another short positional track. Top 5 finish there at the RBC Heritage, another short positional track. And if you take a look at some of his history at some of the other short par 70s or short par 71s, you'll say that he has similar top 10 finishes. So you're talking about somebody who in general is more of a hit or miss type of player, kind of similar to what Scott Stallings, when he gets himself into contention, he usually tends to take advantage of it, whereas he's going to miss plenty of cuts. I'm okay with that in these large field GPPs. I'm okay taking on that sort of risk this week. So the shots gained metrics look great, just like Brendan Todd. You can see losing a little bit off the tee, which might be a little bit surprising, but gaining with the approach play like we're looking for, and quite significantly at that, at nearly 2/3 of a stroke per round, gaining over 1/4 of a stroke per round with the putting. But like I said, loves bent grass, so could perhaps improve on that number this week and make him an even better play per to modeling here as well. So of them there at that price tag, I think he's adequately priced, and perhaps, kind of like a Brendan Todd who didn't play all that well last week, because he ended on such a quote-unquote sour note, he ends up being a little bit lower owned. So I like him for all of those reasons. It will certainly be a key factor of my poll. And now lastly, the last core pick we're getting to is at the threshold at 8,000, going to be Cameron Champ. And for me, absolutely love his upside. TPC Twin Cities, the home of the 3M Open, is a golf course that I'm using as a comp course this week. And Cameron Champ, he's played well here before. I mean, if you just take a look at his course history, you'll see that last year he finished in 11th place, missed cut the time before that, and of late has started to flash something, right? Despite having some missed cuts on his record, top 10 at the Mexico Open, at the Masters, had that top 15 finish. He's going to have that volatility to him, but he's at least shown something there, right? And if we take a look at the shots gained metrics, you start to see a few more breadcrumbs. First off, gaining a ton of strokes off the tee, the approach play starting to return to close to neutral. And in fact, if you take a look at his best proximity buckets, they're these shorter stats from 50 to 125, that 125 to 150. Cameron Champ is surprisingly good. So, when you start to do some of these, deep dives into his analytics, the more and more you're starting to like a Cameron Champ. And if we take a look at his stats on bent grass, you can see not the best, right? Losing about 1/3 of a stroke per round. He's worse on other surfaces. So I'm at least have that going for him there. I like the fact that he had an 11th place finish here last year and has at least in the last month or so shown an ability to get to a ceiling, right? And I mean, the rest of the field, when we get to the value picks video here a little bit later, you're going to see it just drops off like a rock, right? You can feel pretty solid about guys like a Cam Davis, Brendan Todd. They've at least been a little bit consistent. When you get past this lower part of the 8K range, you're really starting to have to take some shots. And honestly, Cameron Champ, with the modeling of late, some of the putting stats and whatnot, you're obviously taking a shot on him, but compared to other players in this field, he has a ton more actual winning upside than them. Cameron Champ, when he's on his A game, is borderline unbeatable, particularly in a field of this strength, right? He could beat the field by 5 or 6 strokes. So like him there, $8,000, a high risk play, but an unbelievably high upside play as well. Guys, that's all I've got for this week's core picks. Before you hop on out of here, let me know down in the comments who you've got winning this week. For me, it's a tough choice, but honestly, I think McNeely's got a good shot to take this home, or perhaps maybe somebody like a Brendan Todd, who we haven't seen win for quite some time, but remember, multiple time winner just a few seasons ago. So I wouldn't put it past either of those players, but go ahead and let me know your thoughts down below. And as per usual, expect to see even more content throughout the week. Like I mentioned, value picks dropping a little bit later. We'll have our fades and sleepers, our weekly DFS live stream we do every Wednesday at 7 p.m. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel if you haven't already, so you don't miss any of that content when it drops in the future. As per usual, I appreciate all of your support here, guys. We just got over 2,000 subscribers, which huge milestone here. Did not think we'd do that in just under a year. So I appreciate all of you. You guys are goats out there. Make sure you go ahead and smash that like button too. If you guys haven't already, first off, why haven't you, right? What are you waiting for anyways? Make sure you do that as well. And until next time, fellas, best of luck with all of your lineups and all of your outright bets this week. And let's get some cash.